A lot of these doors that you didn't even think were there. I have gotten to know so many different people in Bay Area just through that conference and volunteering.
Hi everyone, welcome back to What's Ahead. Today I have Akshit Arora here with me. So hi Akshit, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey Sanidhi, thanks for hosting me. Hi everyone, this is Akshit Arora. I work at NVIDIA as a data scientist, and part of my job is to work with NVIDIA's partners and help them basically accelerate their data pipelines or inference pipelines or training pipelines and on GPUs. So we go in, we profile whatever workload there is, and we figure out what are the bottlenecks that they're facing. And based on that, we help them with finding solutions or potential solutions that can work for their specific environment. So that's my job, and I've connected with Sunidhi through the Alumni Association at Thapar University. I was at Thapar undergrad from 2013 to 2017, and I guess Sunidhi is there right now. So great to see students doing all the great work.
Right, so you also did your master's from University of Colorado Boulder, right? So this is going to be like my first episode regarding the postgraduate series in the podcast, right? So going into the entire application process, like what is the structure of applying abroad and how does the timeline look like? And if you can also probably get into some of the essential things that are required to apply abroad for your postgrad.
Okay, so the first thing to understand is there are lots and lots of different kind of degrees that you can pursue as a master's, right? I chose to go for a master's of science, which is MS, and within that, the application process is fairly typical across all the universities that I have seen. Besides, like you may need like one or two more optional essays based on the kind of university you apply to, but the fundamental components there are um, the following, right? So you have the SOP, which is your statement of purpose, where you write what do you want to do, why do you want to do it, and how do you plan to do it. What's sort of your dream and why do you want to work on that? The second component there is recommendation letters. So people who have worked with you before, especially professors, or even if you were working in India while you're applying for MS, then your managers or your skip level managers, they can write a letter of recommendation for you, which is basically saying, hey, this person is genuine and this person actually did the work and that work led to some sort of impact, right? And recommendation letters serve as a validation to the admission committee that, okay, there are people who are watching for this person. The third component really is basically everything that surrounds it. So it could be resume, cover letter, anything extra that they might ask. Sometimes they require you to enter a diversity essay. So that is also an important part. And there's plenty of help in every part of the application process. And based on, what your budget is or how do you want to, how much are you able to express yourself versus how much help you need, there are all sorts of options available out there to help you out.
So you decided to apply for masters abroad, right? Where did you essentially get your help from while applying for the masters?
Right. So for me, it was basically approaching all the seniors that I had that I knew of that are outside India, be it in Europe, be it in Asia or America, and I reached out to all of them. A lot of them were kind enough to tell me, okay, hey, go and change this line in your statement of purpose, or maybe you want to tell the story but in a different way in your statement of purpose. And I ended up having like almost 10 to 20 seniors who were regularly iterating on my SOPs. And I would like literally like a software release. I would release an SOP, get all the feedback from everyone that I can, and then rewrite it. So that was a major help that happened. And then the other part was recommendation letters. So professors were really helpful in drafting and actually getting it to a phase where they can actually talk about my work, because in India, like the classroom sizes are so big and the professor doesn't really know what you've done. So you may want to educate them a little that, hey, if you remember, this was the project that we worked on, and then this project became, open source or some kind of impact that you had. You may want to tell the professor about all that, and then they can write about it, right? Or you can write about it and get it signed by them. So either way really works. But depending on, you really have to like tell the professor what was the impact of the project that you built. Sometimes it does go unnoticed. And that's another part, right? You need to be a self-advocate in a lot of these things. The kind of work you do, you need to commercialize that or put yourself out there so that other people sort of come to know about what you've done. And that opens doors for opportunities for you, because maybe someone else in your peers or in your senior group is thinking of another idea, and maybe they want to use your idea to extend their own idea, and then you can become a contributor there, right? You together make a bigger project. Or if a professor is thinking about certain ideas that he hasn't been able to execute yet with his senior most students, then they can start working with you on those ideas. And that's why publicizing about your project is important, and making sure it has an impact is important. So a lot of the help sort of comes from those connections that you make over time in your undergrad, based on the projects that you do, and the self-advocacy sort of trait that you have to develop alongside it. Otherwise, a lot of things will go unnoticed, and most of the part of the application is to make it explicit what you did and what impact did it make. And that's where I see a lot of gaps in when people are trying to apply and they don't get it. Um, there's a lot of self-advocacy involved.
Right. So I think you touched up on a very, very important topic about self-advocacy, right? Because I think that's something that I'm going to definitely take away from this conversation, right? So moving on to another topic about like the IIT tag, right? Do you think people who have done their undergrad from the IITs usually have an edge over other applicants?
So here's the thing. Imagine you are sitting in the admission committee of a very top school in US, right? And you've seen students year after year coming in and performing and delivering or achieving something else in their lives, right? You've seen those trajectories so many times. Of course, as human beings, we tend to notice those patterns, right? So in their head, people who tend to come from a place called IIT in India do tend to do well in the US or anywhere else in the world, right? So from that standpoint, if you think about it, that is true, that makes a difference, but that's not the only thing that makes a difference, because that's not the only pattern that they have noticed, right? There are plenty of more things that they see in people's trajectories. It could be their GPA, it could be their recommendation letters, it could be the kind of work that they did that makes them unique, and that makes them unique to be well suited to the program that the university is offering. So you need to do your research before applying and see what are the initiatives that university has taken up, what are the initiatives that the professors in the university or the students in the university have taken up, and how does your experience relate to that initiative, and why would you be the right person to take that initiative and do something creative with it and move forward, right, and achieve something. As long as you're able to build that story and you're able to express that, admission committee is open to listening into all the applications. They do read the application, right? And that's where the biggest advantage is. So if you make your projects or the projects that you've done along the way in undergrad, if you represent them in a way that is the most suited for the university itself, that is something that will automatically get you in. And that's something that I noticed for myself as well. For me, the major parts were I was hugely interested in research. I published 3 papers in my undergrad, which is kind of unheard of. And when that happened, and the way I talked about, hey, this university has, these projects in NLP that really, really, really align with what I've done in my research. And if given a chance, I would like to go and extend those projects in this many different ways. And that, I believe, took my application towards acceptance, because that kind of, when you modify, you personalize the application, when you have targets in your head, that, hey, this is the professor I want to work with because of, X, Y, and Z, that's when things start to change. And I came from Thapar and I did well in CU. Now the admission committee of CU is more open to having people from Thapar University, right? And that's how those trends, whatever the tag that you're talking about, that changes over time. There are other places too where people from other colleges have gone to, and that's where you will see this pattern as well. One year a single student comes, does really well. The second year, more and more students from the same university come, right? So that's just something to know. There's a human factor involved, and that's how you identify where you're most likely to get in or not get in. But then again, you have to do your research. You have to make sure that whatever it is that you want is in alignment with whatever it is that university has to offer. If the alignment is missing, I doubt there is any point in applying there.
Yes. Also, moving on to another quick question, right? Does MS help you with your career? Like maybe does it help to accelerate your career growth or let's say kickstart your career?
I would answer that with a question to you. You are in college now. Do you think college helped with your career?
It honestly depends upon you, right? It depends upon how you want to steer your career.
Exactly. The same goes for MS. So it's the same logic, right? A lot of people these days are saying, hey, you don't need college. You can just be a high school graduate and do just fine in the job market. As long as your projects and your passion is reflective of it and you're able to self-advocate, you can do really, really good and you don't need a college degree. But for most of the people who sometimes don't know what they want in their lives just yet, going to college may help, but I don't really support that idea. I feel like a lot of these decisions need to come from within, and you have to do that work on yourself slowly as you grow up as to what is it that you really want. Even if it's a temporary passion, like you don't want to worry about, hey, if I, let's say I'm signing up for a 4-year degree, and what if I run out of my passion or run out of my emotions for this particular field in 6 months? What do I do then? And that's where I need you to realize, even if it's a temporary thing, it's your responsibility to go and pursue it in all seriousness. And if you figure out along the way that you're maybe not the best person to do that, and maybe your interest lies somewhere else, then you pivot. And that is okay. No one's going to blame you for that. But if you don't even try, then things are never going to happen, right? You would never know what kind of things exist, and your exposure will not increase. You wouldn't know anything about yourself. So I would definitely say go ahead and try. In terms of masters, look around you. What are the things that you would like to achieve, and why, right? Master's degree that people do mostly sometimes to evaluate whether they want to do a PhD or not. And sometimes to get a PhD in US, it's good. And if you have an undergrad in India, it's good to have a master's in US before you actually commit yourself for, I don't know how many years for a PhD. It was the same case with me. I went into the master's degree thinking that I will convert it into a PhD, because that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to become a research scientist eventually in industry. But during my master's, I realized that, hey, during, I was doing my research, I found an internship at a startup. And while during that internship, an interesting thing happened, right? I had to deploy an algorithm I had developed in my master's degree so far on a research paper, right? I had to deploy it in real world. And I was not able to do that in 3 months. And that is something I took home with me. And I said, okay, if I don't know how to put my research into production, how am I gonna make any kind of research which is impactful? And I wanted to really, really learn how to do that. So that's where I pivoted, and then I went for started finding jobs where I would actually get the exposure of deploying machine learning algorithms out in the real world, and developing that understanding and about yourself. And after that, it becomes easier to explain it to someone else as well. And that's when people start giving you opportunities because they feel that you're genuine and you have really, really put a thought into what is going on, why it's going on. And you know what happened when I arrived at NVIDIA? This was one of the biggest problems that NVIDIA is still solving, is how to make it easier for people to deploy machine learning algorithms on like large scale. So those are the kind of things that they were able to relate to. When I gave my interview, I talked about what are the challenges that TensorFlow has or PyTorch has when you talk about deployment. And instantly they were able to connect that, hey, we are facing the same challenges, and this person might be the right person to do this job because he has gone through that pain of deployment of a machine learning algorithm, which is not a straightforward path. I'm talking about 20, yeah, this was 2018. And 2018, we did not have deployment frameworks that were like easy to follow. So anyway, having this understanding about like what you did and why you did it really helps you go a long way in general in life, I think. So in terms of career, if you feel like a master's degree is going to help you get somewhere you really want to be in your life, sure. I came from master's degree for my PhD, thinking that I want to get a PhD, but then I pivoted, and that's fine too. But if you don't feel like you need a PhD right now, and you have other reasons to go to a master's, and there can be many reasons to go to a master's, including the fact that, hey, you get to go to, like, say, US, and you get to travel, and you get to go into like the US job market. That's fine too. There are lots and lots of different types of people. I wouldn't do that personally, I know that, but that works too. That is another, yeah, another good reason to come here and do this.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense, right? So moving on to like the financial aspect of studying abroad, right? Could you elaborate more on scholarships or the assistantships that are available and how are they beneficial?
So most of the universities, the public universities, not the private ones, will have research assistantship or something called teaching assistantship. So research assistantship is basically you, as a master's student, you go participate in a project that already has, research grant and already has the money. Your work is fairly defined as to what you need to do, what kind of projects you'll be working on, and you go talk to the professor, you get into research, and that basically funds you for the time that you're during your master's, right? So one of my very good friends, he did a research assistantship in Georgia Tech, and that's how he got by. His application process was also, by the way, fairly different than mine. He approached the professor first rather than going through the admission committee, and because his research in undergrad was perfectly aligning with this professor's research, and he was fairly targeted in his grad school applications. He knew exactly the research groups he wanted to work for, and otherwise he didn't want to come to US. So it was a fairly targeted approach, and that's what the benefits are. If you know what you're doing, you will get in. And so that's what I liked about his trajectory. But in looking at my trajectory, it was mostly, came here for doing masters, assume that you're going to spend all the money that you've estimated, and you have to taken a loan and everything. And then when you come here, you start looking for opportunities actively through networking, right? And that's when I got the opportunity to become a teaching assistant for undergrad courses here. So like Intro to Python or data structures, those the kind of things you already have a very good exposure of in Thapar or wherever you've done your bachelor's, you tend to have that exposure. And once you have that, it's easy to teach or at least tell the students about or administer assignments or administer exams. And it was mostly about helping the teachers and execute on, like, however many amount of students they have, we scale it out basically. So they're like, at one point on a course, there are 10 teaching assistants sometimes, because the class size is huge and you just have to manage a lot of things. And yeah, so those are the two main ways to get funding. I believe there can be more, like if you go do a part-time job, and there are plenty of part-time jobs across the campus. That's how I started. When I first came here, I was a receptionist once on a dorm, and I have also served as a cashier at a bookstore, and I've also served as a grader That is all before I got a TA. So the benefit of having something like an assistantship, like even if it's research or teaching assistantship, is that it's just the stipend that you get, but also depending on the department, they also waive your tuition fees. So essentially, you end up paying nothing, and you are given a stipend which covers your living cost, and you don't really have to. You don't need money anymore from India or anywhere wherever your home is. So that's something interesting about public schools, and that's why I preferred applying to public schools more than like private schools like CMU or Stanford, which is again first of all very hard to get into, and then when you get there, it's really hard to get any kind of funding. There is also another source of funding, which is called scholarships that exist in India. One of my very good friends did his trajectory involved that he went to a private school, but before then, since he was doing really well in his undergrad, he took the opportunity to go to some foundation in India and get a scholarship at that point to fund his entire master's degree. And that was a very interesting thing that I learned through that process was, hey, there are the kind of opportunities that sometimes you wouldn't know about. And that's where networking helps a lot. That's where knowing people who have done this quite a bit of times and going and asking people on LinkedIn, even if that's your thing, you should really research about people who have walked on the same path that you're about to walk on, and help you plan. So that's another important lesson, like always network, always maintain contacts with seniors, and uh, know what kind of trajectories people have had, so that when your time comes, you know what to do exactly and how to execute on the path that you really want to be on.
Right, right. Right. So you're working in media right now, right? So this was directly after you graduated from your master's. So what was the process of finding a job like after graduating?
So unlike universities in India, whereas the concept is of on-campus placement, here we don't have any on-campus placements as such. We have career fairs where different companies come and have different stalls. You can go and talk to. There will be some engineers from that company who are happy to talk to you and explain about to you what they work on. You drop your resume there, and if they're interested, they reach out to you. But mostly, all the process is handled by the company itself. The university, all it does is basically helps the students build a resume. So there are a bunch of career counselors on campus who will happily review your resume if you need it. Anytime you can schedule a time with them and they would go over your profile with you. They can even help you improve your LinkedIn profile. So very basic things. Of course, they're also handling, people from other branches or not just computer science. So their skills are more generic. Like, is your profile or what you've written, is it elegant or not? And then beyond that, it's on to you how to specialize the skills that you have and how do you advocate yourself on those things. So they aren't really helpful in that regard when it comes to specialization. Those are a really great resource for undergrads. But when it comes to grad students, it becomes a little tricky. But then I wanted to say that an option is really there, and option is great. If you don't know how to write a resume, you should really go and use that option quite a bit. And have used it myself. The second thing that university does is host these career fairs all the time. They would reach out to their alumni, and the alumni will talk to their companies and then come to the school on the career fair, as I described before, and they might select students based on the resumes that they get that day. And after that, all of the process is hosted by the company itself. You have to go to their office and give interviews and stuff like that. So that's essentially the two major university resources. But after that, you don't have any on-campus sort of placement concept here. University doesn't really manage the resume pipeline. Like in Thapar, and if I remember correctly, you used to submit your resume once to the career cell, and they have a standard format for each and every resume, and they just give that to the companies, and then they shortlist students and based on the GPA. And a lot of processes are standardized, but here you get to choose whatever format you want for your own resume. You talk to the company and then they shortlist you. The GPAs comes secondary in that regard. There are obviously some, you know, some things that the company uses for benchmarking or like for comparing students. But if your background, since as a grad school student, there are so many varieties of backgrounds that people have. People like me who came straight after undergrad. There are people who worked in India for like 4 years, and then they're coming. And so in their case, like their GPA is not going to matter, right? Whatever their experience in India, if that aligns well with what the company is trying to do, it's a slam dunk and you can just get in. So that's why I say there is no standard way to compare students at a grad level, given the different kinds of backgrounds that people have and different kinds of research that people have. So there is that aspect. And mostly it's then after that, it's about off campus. So you go to the company's website, you apply, or you figure out an alumni who works there and then interview them, ask them about things that, hey, how does the company work? How does the company teams are structured? And then if you feel like you would be a good fit, you ask them to refer you. And that's how most of the time I've seen it work. And even in my case, it was a referral from someone that I knew from my university. So that's how, that's why, again, networking and self-advocacy is so important. One of the interesting trajectories that I've seen in this scenario are when people, they have interesting projects that they've done in their master's or their undergrad, and the projects themselves become very popular for some reason. Maybe they have an interesting aspect about the project that they publicize, and a lot of the people in the world, or it becomes, what we call viral, right? In the developer community, it gets a lot of GitHub stars or something like that. That is another way to go for off-campus placements, because in that scenario, people or companies will simply reach out to you. The recruiters reach out to you because they're interested in the kind of project that you've built, and that might be good, or that is the kind of skill that they're looking for in the company as well. So those, again, self-advocacy plays a big game. If you're good at it, then a lot of these doors that you didn't even think were there existed will open up for you, and people will reach out to you. But then it's important, it's on to you to first do the projects and then talk about those projects. A lot of people do the first thing, they will do the project, they'll do amazing projects, but they will forget to talk about it. And that's not the complete picture, right? You have to be able to communicate the importance of your project to the world for it to be used in certain different ways. And that's an important skill, I feel.
Right. So how do you talk about the project? So you covered talking about, building viral projects. And then the second part is talking about the projects. So what are some of the ways people can use to actually talk about the project?
Well, there are plenty of ways. So there are plenty of small scale, regional level developer conferences where they're always looking for people to come up and talk about their projects. So you can always apply for those and track those conferences in the first place, right? If you ask me, I have presented my work well. As a research student, I've always presented my work to research avenues, which are mostly research conferences. But now, after coming to US, after coming to Bay Area, I've realized there are a lot of regional conferences that exist, and I have given talks there about the kind of work that I do at NVIDIA. So those are the same conferences where even students can go and talk about their projects and get noticed by people from different companies, and see if they have shared interests or not. And that might lead to hiring as well. There are a lot of virtual conferences these days as well. So a lot of regional conferences in Bay Area that used to be called regional, they are now accepting applications from all parts of the world, because now everything is virtual. You can basically live stream from anywhere. You can basically live stream from anywhere. And that's the beauty of internet, I would say. You see, you can sit in India and you can still speak at a conference in San Francisco, and it will get equal attention because the avenue is the same, right? In India, there are all sorts of meetup groups now, like for machine learning. in almost every region, you would find meetup groups where people will come and talk about the new paper they read or some new algorithm they developed. And similarly, if you don't know, let's say you're interested in conversational AI, but you don't know any group around you in conversational AI, you can go start one because people will be interested in that. And you can also launch it virtually. So people, if you see that, okay, in my college, no one else is interested in conversational AI, but I am, I can still start it. I can still go and find other people in other colleges or nearby colleges and get a group. And once you get a group going, once live stream and give them a platform, I am sure a lot of people will be attracted to your platform and will come talk about their project. So then it becomes, um, you know, a really good thing for, like, any kind of platform is a great way to advertise about whatever it is that you're doing. And you should really look out for these platforms and support them and even volunteer in a couple of them. I have volunteered for this conference called Pi Bay for 2 years in a row now. And it's been an amazing experience. I have gotten to know so many different people in Bay Area just through that conference and volunteer. And I've even spoken at the conference last year. So that's just a skill and an asset that you collect over time. And it's something that is really worth it. And you should start doing it from an undergrad level itself. I wish I would have done that on my during my undergrad. So definitely something to watch out for.
Right, right. That's actually a really, really good point. Right. So this is something that I'm very curious to know about, and is what are some of the things that you did in your university that you think stands out for your masters?
During my master's, so the first day, or I guess not the first day, but the first week that I landed in US, there was an email that went out and said, hey, we have PhD dissertation going on, and anyone is invited to it because that's what PhD dissertations are. It's open to the public. Anyone can come and join and ask questions. And after the dissertation, everybody steps out except the committee that is supposed to evaluate the dissertation. And the output of that evaluation is going to be, hey, whether we want to give this candidate the degree or not, whether this candidate has done the right work or not. So I went in and I showed up on a dissertation because I knew that the advisor for that particular student is the person that I really want to work with. So it would be good for me to get to know what kind of projects that they're working on. And that I showed up and it looked like I was the only public representation there. There were a lot of students who were the advisor students or the friends of the PhD who was presenting. And there were like a group of professors who were there to evaluate the presentation. So I was there and it's a very, people are really, really nervous in that presentation. But I because the end goal is, after those 30-45 minutes, you would hear the result of the 5 years that you've put into a PhD. And that's a lot for anyone. Just like in plus one, plus two, right? We go in, we sit for the JE exam, and after 2 hours or whatever 3 hours it is, we really are waiting anxiously for our results. But in this case, the result is just going to come in 15 more minutes, right? So a lot of people are nervous around it. So I ended up talking to a lot of different people when we stepped out and we were waiting for the committee to evaluate. And one of them was the professor himself. And that's when I had my first conversation with him. And that conversation basically led me to work on his project for, a full year before he went to industry. And within that, I worked on the same project that the PhD was presenting that day. The first ever week that I was here, when I learned about the project, that was the project that I eventually worked on. The guy did get his PhD, so that was a good thing. But that project I worked on, we further worked on that project and we built a research paper around it. And then after that, I got the internship because the project involved data set from a startup. My internship was also with that startup. And the kind of algorithm that I'd worked on, my task was to actually deploy those algorithms. So that whole thing began from like the first week of me taking the initiative to go show up on a PhD dissertation. And that was really something that stands out to me, because if that hadn't happened, all of the other series of events that have followed wouldn't have happened for me. Maybe the professor would have not noticed me, or tons of different possibilities in life, but that is one thing. So if you are trying to take away something, is always look at all the possibilities that a certain action may entail. Sometimes you wouldn't know all the possibilities, and that's okay too. If you feel like it, you should just take the initiative and actually go and show up to things. Half of the battle is just showing up. After that, a lot of different things can happen. And I think as long as you keep showing up to things that interest you, you will get to know various interesting things in the world, and all of that will, uh, add to whatever it is that you're trying to build in life.
And that's so nice to hear, actually. Right. So, another conversation that I wanted to have with you was that would you like to talk a little bit about the courses that you took during your master's and maybe sort of draw comparisons with the ones that are offered in colleges in India?
Okay. So is the question around the course content, or is the question around the way course is taught?
Courses taught and also the course content, both ways.
Okay, I think the course content is very similar, if not like I mean, it's not really too different. The course content is almost always really similar, because we all have the same research that we use to build our curriculums, right? And more often than not, they're always the same for the entire world, actually. So there is no difference in the content, right? As far as curriculum content is concerned, if it's updated, every 6 months, it's great. And the teachers who are teaching the content usually do make sure that, to the best of their ability, whatever the content is, it's the latest content, right? So that's not a difference. I would say the course content is the same. But in the ways that things are taught in India versus in the US for grad level courses, the courses that I've experienced, um, there are, so it completely depends on the professor. I know some great professors in India, and I know some great professors here. And if the professor is great, they will make sure the content is updated, they'll make sure the class is interactive, they'll make sure the content is delivered in such a way that your understanding is built up over time, and the course is set up in a way that everyone can enjoy their time during that course. So it really depends on the professor. That's a disclaimer, I would say. But the other thing that to notice is in general, the kind of in general, the education system in India versus in US, right? And there are quite a bit of differences in the system itself. And the professors, even though they're really great, they still have to adhere to that process. The process is really enforced in India, like, exams, or the way you evaluate and the way you give degree to someone in India. And that sometimes inhibits the best way the course can be taught. Uh, and that's okay, I guess. In US, you would see things like uh, each and every course that you do will have a different pattern to it. Like some will be very just project driven. All you need to do is show up every week or two. The professor will have a small projects for the students, and they can creatively build anything they want, as long as they're able to communicate that project, and as long as they're able to present it to the rest of the team or rest of the class. And the way they present it, the way they talk about it, the project in itself, is it good or not? They would mentor you, by the way, alongside that. Hey, this project can maybe, if you can add this layer to it, this will become more interesting, right? So I've seen and worked with those professors as well. I have never seen a project-based course in India so far. So that is like one of the major patterns that I've noticed, major difference that I've noticed, I guess. And then also the kind of evaluation, right? Even if someone is conducting an exam for a particular course, then there might be the case that it's an open book exam. The questions in the coursework itself will be so interesting that you would not find an answer to those questions in the textbook, because the question itself is not that straightforward. But open book exams, so that it's not like you have to memorize everything. It's more about creativity and thinking about the open-ended questions that are there and how do you answer those. So that is another interesting thing that I've noticed.
Right? What advice do you have for anyone who is planning to apply abroad for masters?
Network. I think that's one, because through the network you're gonna find people who will happily advocate for you. Sometimes, if you're applying for a job, they would refer you, or who would work with you to improve your aspects of your application, or they would give you platform to voice about, or to talk about your projects out loud, right? And I feel like those platforms are really important, and there are plenty of those platforms out there. You just have to look, and I don't think we are trained to look for those things, right? Usually as you're growing up, at least for me, publicizing explicitly about what is it that you've done, it was not something that is encouraged. It is usually said that the whole publicity follows you automatically when you do something,
Right.
which I don't think is true. That's not the whole picture. You have to, it's your responsibility that whatever you have done is communicated in the right way to the right audience. And then after that, if things happen. If they don't happen, that's great. That's fine too. Even then, you learn something about what you did, right? No feedback is a feedback in itself. So, or no response is a response, feedback in itself. So that's something that I would encourage quite a bit. And I see people lacking there, because people don't usually take out time from their college life to actually make it a point to talk to someone and refine their point of view about how they see themselves going and pursuing the master's degree or whatever degree that they're applying. But you really have to go through that process if you really want to communicate a story to the admission committee saying that, hey, this is what I want to do and why I want to do it. If you don't have it buttoned down, or if you don't have it like clear in your head, you won't be able to write it. And if you're not able to write it, then it's not going to lead to the best results that you were hoping to achieve. It might get you into some university. It might even be a good university if you're lucky. But if you don't know what you're going to do there, then the whole experience of going to a master's degree will degrade. And that is something I don't recommend. Like, you are better off not doing masters in that case and doing something else that you're more passionate about, and follow that for some time. Even if that doesn't work out, and if you rework through whatever it is that you've done and you figure out that masters is something that you really, really need, sure, then apply, but apply with clear intentions. And after you're done looking at all the other priorities in life. But yeah, have really good clarity of thought. That will help quite a bit, because the journey through masters is going to be really, really tough. There will be times when you will think, hey, why did I come here, and why did I come all the way from home and did all these things. The projects are going to be tough, the assignments are going to be really tough, the open book exams are worse. But the thing is, at the end of the day, if you have a clear story in your head about why you did what you did and what you're going to do, then that is going to make it easy for you to do all the hard work that is needed and not derail you from whatever it is that you're doing, because it's easy to disorient yourself when the stress is so high. And I wouldn't recommend jumping into this kind of thing without the right set of ideals or whatever it is that is driving you to do a master's degree or to achieve something in life.
Right. That's a great piece of advice. Right. So I like to, at the end of every conversation, have like a small rapid fire, right? So
Okay.
let's just begin with it, right? 5 words that you use to describe yourself.
So the 5 words will be adventurous, brave, creative, different, energetic. That ABCDE. That's what I've created for myself, and I think that's something I use as a affirmation for myself as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Right. So the second question, where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
I see myself as the head of a country 10 years from now.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Right.
Yeah.
So, what does Akshit Arora like to do in his free time?
Oh, photography.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like your photography.
Thank you.
It's sort of an interesting one, right? I've never asked this to anyone before. What is that one thing that annoys you the most?
Um, I think I prefer tabs than spaces.
Lastly, if a movie was made on you, what genre would it be?
Oh, I would like it to be sci-fi. Where I play the crazy scientist, but we'll see. I could be the victim too. That's fine. But I would like it to be sci-fi.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I hope this helps and reaches out to as many people as it can, whoever is, trying to apply for their masters. And thank you so much for being here.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for hosting. And this is, your platform. So I hope things go well. This is a beautiful thing that you're doing, I would say. And when I was talking about platforms, the example that I was gonna give the audience was this is a great platform. Whoever is listening, like look at what Sunidhi has done here and learn from that. If you were to create your own platform, this is how you do it. But then this is not the only kind of platform, right? This is more about interaction. Your own platform could include, just students talking about their projects or side projects that they're working on at Thapar, and trying to get audience with some great professors at Thapar, and that connecting the two big gaps right now all of those discussions are happening in silos, right, isolation, and you could potentially bridge that gap. There are lots and lots of possibilities here. If you would like to talk about it, feel free to reach out to me, or I guess Sunidhi, I'm going to sign you up. But yeah, I am really excited to see what you do next.